panel is cities and states. And this relates to a bit of regulation and what some of the leaders are doing, and hopefully how you can see what maybe you could take home to your own community based on what some of the experts here are doing in both U.S. and Canada. Jennifer Gerholdt is the Director of Environmental Initiatives at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. She will be chairing the panel. If everyone wants to come up, it's okay. Elizabeth Balkan is the Manager of Solid Waste Policy and Procurement. Now that just changed, so you're going to have to explain. I forgot your new title already. Tom Outerbridge is the General Manager of Sims Municipal Recycling, who we will visit tomorrow, where we will visit tomorrow. And Christian Felske is a technical specialist, processing research and regulatory waste management services at the City of Edmonton, doing great stuff. So, Jennifer.
Great. Thanks, Doug. How much time do we have, Doug, by the way? So we're at 4:30.
Yeah, till 30 minutes.
Okay, so 5?
Okay.
That's fine?
Yeah. 5 a little plus, a little more.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's very nice to be here with all of you. Thanks to Doug and my colleague, Steve Rockland, for the opportunity to spend the day with you. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I'm very pleased to be chairing this discussion around how cities, states, and countries are changing with regards to their recycling programs. But before I turn it over to the panelists, just very quickly tell you a little bit more about who I am and what I do, for those of you that are not as familiar. I'm with the Chamber of Commerce Foundation. We are the 501c3 nonprofit affiliate of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And our mission is to promote American competitiveness by addressing issues that impact our business community, our nation, and our economy. And we do that through a variety of programs. I'm with the Corporate Citizenship Center, and we are essentially the CSR entity within the foundation. We're supported by more than 150 companies, including Dow, MGM, Shell, FedEx, Office Depot, and many others that are committed to maximizing their positive environmental and social impacts. So I run our energy and water and waste management programs. And our work is really centered on 3 things. Number 1 is tell the story of business and how companies are having a positive impact. Provide research to inform decision-making and best practices, and convene the private sector and other stakeholders to talk about the issues that they need to talk about to move the needle on a variety of corporate citizenship topics. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to the panelists to tell you a little bit more about their recycling programs. And because we are so late in the day, and I really want to maximize audience participation, I'm actually going to turn it over to you as soon as they give their 5-minute overview. So if you can be jotting down your burning questions that you have about these initiatives, that would be great, since we only have 30 minutes and want to maximize our time together this afternoon. So, Elizabeth, I'll kick you off.
I understand that Ron Gonin, who spoke this morning, talked with you a little bit about what New York City is doing. So in the interest of time, I'll just go through some of those topics very quickly. As you know, we've got a lot going on throughout the waste stream with our organics program, our textile recycling program, our e-waste recycling program. On the plastics, am I too close to you? In plastics, we've expanded the acceptable plastics, which can be collected at curbside from New York residents. As of last year, this is the largest expansion to New York's recycling program in over 25 years. And so it's major. It's not only something which will significantly increase the tonnage that we get from New York residents, recyclable tonnage, but it will also, what it has done more importantly is significantly simplify the process of recycling for most New Yorkers. I think there's probably some perception, true or untrue, about New Yorkers not, really caring or not really being very likely to, very responsive when you tell them what to do. But I think a lot of this is erroneous. Really, I think up until last year, many New Yorkers were really quite eager to recycle and just very confused as to what could go in the bins, what couldn't go in the bins. we are also, last year we also passed landmark legislation, which will ban we passed landmark legislation which will ban the use of expanded polystyrene in New York, the use and the sale of this material. So in addition to trying to make sure that we have the systems in place to collect as much recyclable material, take it out of the waste stream and put it to use as recyclable material, we're also trying to make sure that the things in our waste stream which cannot be recycled are not contaminating our sorters and not contaminating our water bodies. Plastic film from bags and plastic EPS styrofoam is a major problem, both at the global level, as you know, in the world's waterways, oceans, and rivers, but even within New York City, these materials block storm water catchments and other areas where the city is, very reliant upon unblocked waterways and pathways. So it is critical that we get this material out of the waste stream. Incidentally, we're also, the city is also considering legislation to introduce a surcharge for plastic bags in retail establishments. If passed, whether it becomes ultimately is a plastic bag ban or a surcharge associated with plastic bags, we are confident that what this will do is significantly, again, change people's behavior. It will make people stop and think about the consumption of a plastic bag, whether or not it's absolutely necessary, and think about using alternative materials.
Yeah, it's a lot better. I don't think yours is working.
Turn this off.
Turn this off.
He's 59.
That's okay, I didn't say anything important. So, plastic bags are like styrofoam. They present a lot of problems because of their prevalence in our waste stream. And, we're trying to develop programs, as I said, across the waste stream to either make sure that the material can be used within New York or close to New York to generate value for New York's economy and to create jobs. That's a big part of what we're doing on the organics with regard to organic material and with regard to the expansion of rigid plastics. But we also need to address the portion of our waste stream which cannot be effectively recycled. And so that's the reason why we've passed legislation banning expanded polystyrene and are also looking at plastic bag legislation.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. Tom?
Good afternoon. Yes, as you heard, we are giving a tour tomorrow, so I won't go into that. But if you have the opportunity to come, certainly you'll see a lot more than I can try to explain in terms of what we do there and the facility we built. But just for backgrounds, I manage Sims Municipal Recycling. We're a division of Sims Metal Management. And Sims Metal Management is a global scrap metal recycling company. I think we're one of the largest, if not the largest, scrap metal companies in the world. And also one of the largest electronic waste processors in the world. And the company dates back to, I think it's 1918, Albert Sims collecting scrap metal on a bicycle. And bring that up only to say that the company is not a waste management company that tacked on a recycling business to service municipalities. It's always been a recycling company and predates sort of the current push for sustainability. We obviously embrace that attention, but it really has always been based on commodity values and the raw material values, and that drives very much the decisions we make, and also sort of as a constant attention on commodity values in markets, as well as the technologies and pushing the technology to get more and more out of this scrap that we buy, whether it's a computer or an automobile, or in the case of New York City, the city's curbside recycling. The city, we started handling curbside recycling in New York after 9/11, when Bloomberg cut back the recycling program to just metal and allowed us to bid on that, or it made a company interested in bidding on that, rather than just buying scrap metal from the waste management companies that were handling these recyclables. And as a result, we've now gotten full-fledged into glass and plastic and paper processing. And the city, in terms of one of the takeaways here in the city, after decades of short-term contracts with 10-day cancellation provisions, much to the city's credit, they released a long-term RFP, 20-year contract, which we won, and what that allows, obviously, is a whole different level of capital investment that you can't do with a short-term contract that can be terminated. And that's certainly our facility in Brooklyn tomorrow is an outcome of that long-term commitment, and our financial investment, as well as that facility we have in Jersey. Just two, I guess, quick things. One is we are built for it in New York City. We know a little bit more than half of the recyclables are still going into the trash. We want them. We're built to process it. Our customers want more material. That's not the bottleneck here. Right now, the bottleneck in New York City is public participation. So I'm actually here as much to listen as to talk to people today, hearing ideas about how to make it sexier, how to get people excited about it, how to get people motivated. I certainly don't have the answers in that regard, but that is right now the bottleneck to it. That's the low-hanging fruit, if you will, in New York. It's not finding ways to recycle difficult objects. It's really just getting the basic materials into the right bin. And then the second thing is we are magicians. So we have an enormous amount of sorting equipment. We use the best technology that we can find and invest a huge amount of money in it. But in the end, I can't separate a piece of paper that's been laminated to two different types of plastic that are fused together with a layer of aluminum in between. We can only do what we can do. So there is a big role, obviously, on the design side. And I think there is a lot more interest. We're talking with Closed Loop Fund, these other organizations that now really seem to be getting involved in taking an interest in the recyclability of their products, because there's a big difference, I think, the public doesn't often make between recycled content and recyclability. And from my standpoint, actually, recyclability is almost more important, because the markets are by and large there, but we can't get it to the markets if it's not sortable in the first place. So I guess I would leave it at that.
Thanks, Tom. Christian, tell us what's going on in the city of Edmonton.
Yes. Oh, whoa. Everybody's awake now. My name is Christian Felske. I come from a much smaller place than these two people. The city of Edmonton, the capital of the province of Alberta, east of the Canadian mountains, and they used to have a very good hockey team. The province is known for a vast oil and gas industry. It's an economic powerhouse, it's growing, but there's also a lot of questions about the environmental footprint of all these activities, and the better it is, or the better. I'm thankful for the opportunity to talk to you guys a little bit about the integrated waste management systems the city has built. And city is about 800,000 people, and we're responsible for the collections of the residential waste stream and some of the commercial stream in the city. And we're anxiously waiting for the operation of a waste biofuel facility in the city, which will bring us to a waste diversion rate of about 90% of the residential waste stream. So that's a pretty big accomplishment. It's much higher, much higher than the Canadian average in terms of waste diversion. But I think the whole journey for the city started about 25 years ago, and it started with what we've talked about a lot with the landfill at that time in the city getting full, and the city, through a series of consultation with the residents, not able to find another landfill site. So that's a very unique situation, and it really was the driver for us to start down the road in looking at how can we maximize waste diversion from landfill and at the same time, how can we increase the product or the product value from what people at that time used to consider waste. We all know that this is it's no longer waste. We all agree that there are some valuable products with it. So by the end of the 90s, the city developed a 30-year strategic plan, and which we really stay on track till now, and that should mean something with regards to politicians or municipal politicians, mayors and council, and everybody along those lines was really engaged, which was very critical for the success. So based in the 90s, we built a social community relations programs, community-based marketing initiatives to get volunteers engaged into things like recycling, into things like composting. We have reuse centers where Edmontonians bring their waste, what they consider waste, other people can pick it up and use it for themselves for free. So it's a variety of social-based activities we did, which really helped us in communicating with our residents. And initially, obviously, we built a recycling program within the city. We have a two-way stream system, so the recyclable go into what we call a blue bag, and all the rest of the waste goes into a second one. So the recycling program grew over time. It's now in its 26th year, and we've collected about, I think, 950,000 tons of recyclable materials all along the way and shipped them into the market. So it's quite impressive for the city. And we have a participation rate. We measure our voluntary participation rate in recycling every year. It's about over 90%. So it's a strong recycling program. And overall, this constitutes to about 20% of the residential waste in Edmonton. The second step we took was looking at the organics. So the person this morning showed this pie chart, and it was very similar for New York, and it's very similar towards the situation in Edmonton. I think in most North American cities, 40% of the waste is organic nature. So we built organic composting facility to capture about 125,000 tons per year and to transfer it into a compost product. Now, with the city growing at this current rate, we're contemplating, or actually we're very close to put out an RFP for an anaerobic digestion facility. We talked about anaerobic digestion this morning a little bit, creating biogas and renewable energy from the byproduct. So with this, we came with the recycling program, with the composting program, we came to about 60%, and then we took a closer look at what's left, like what is the 40%, and that's all started way before my time with the city, about 10, 12 years ago, where the city looked at what is there to utilize in terms of energy or carbon in the waste stream, and they did a quite extensive review of technologies at that time, and we know that the technology world is quickly changing towards what waste to energy and what waste conversion technologies are out there. So we did our review, and we stumbled across a startup company at this time named Anachem. They're based, or they founded from the University of Sherbrooke in Quebec, headquartered in Montreal, and they have developed, their founder, former professor, has developed a gasification process, taking basically the non-recyclable and the non-compostable waste, converting it into a synthetic gas, mainly carbon monoxide and hydrogen, and then use these compounds as a building blocks for the generation of biochemicals, initially methanol, and to biofuels, and to ethanol. So this facility, this technology was chosen very early in the stage. We did R&D with it. We did test feasibility studies using their pilot scale facilities, using our waste stream. And it's a longer process. These things don't happen over time. As I mentioned, it took us about 10 years to really develop this project, with getting the R&D done, the feasibility done, regulatory approvals in place, permitting, and also grant funding, which is necessary for these type of, I think, new emerging technologies. So The project in itself, as I mentioned, will take about 100,000 tons of non-recyclable, non-compostable materials and turn that into what we call the refuse-derived fuel, an RDF short, a very homogeneous type confetti-like material, which includes some of the plastics which we were not capturing through our recycling program, and using that as a feedstock for the Anachem technology. So about 100,000 tons per year. Anachem tells us they can produce about 380 liters of methanol per ton of RDF into the facility. So, and that's the facility which is currently being commissioned in Edmonton. They say it's the world's first waste-to-biofuel facility, and we're all excited to see it starting. At the same time, we also built some research capacity in Edmonton. We have a pilot facility, a 20 times smaller unit there where we can do tests from us as a waste management operation. We're interested in testing new feedstocks, waste which we couldn't treat or process before, and testing the feasibility for biofuel generation. We're doing some interesting work with the Columbia University and the ACC on the impact of residual plastics and the biofuel generation or the yield of different types of residual plastic content. So stay tuned for that. So all in all, this is, I guess, the story I wanted to tell. I probably captured more of the 5 minutes. So thank you very much for the attendance.
Thanks. So in the interest of time, we only have about 10 more minutes. So I want to kick it over to you guys to ask your questions of Elizabeth, Tom, and Christian. And do we have any microphone runners who can run mics for us? Unless you can talk as loud as I can. Thank you. Questions? Right here in the front. And if you could just state your name and affiliation, please.
Sure. My name is Scott Ballantyne. I have a company called Explore All Industries, used to be with Microsoft. And I'm from Seattle. And the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, we just had a meeting in Seattle, and we toured some MRFs there and have seen a lot of recovery facilities, the Peel facility in Toronto and stuff. And out west, they moved to compostable materials for food-based packaging to get rid of the styrofoam in that area. And a topic that came up there was also the big green wall from China. And I was curious on the East Coast and up in Canada and in Alberta how that impacted your materials and your ability to move them and having to sort them differently or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it's called the green fence or green wall, but anyway, it made the same effect essentially. No, in fact, that's the same weather as it did on the West Coast. I mean, maybe a little bit less dependent on export, but yes, we were, like a lot of companies, making a mixed plastic bale that included a fair amount of valuable plastics, but also some plastics that have no value here, effectively. So when the green fence went up, those exports stopped, and we were fortunately in a position that we have enough sorting equipment that we started basically sorting polypropylene as a distinct grade. So we don't make a 3 through 7 bale, we don't make a 1 through 7 bale. We sort polypropylene, HDPE, PET, bulky plastics, and all of those actually now, unfortunately, have actually reasonably strong domestic and Canadian markets. That does leave then materials which were going out in that mixed bale now as residue. So effectively, our residue has gone up. Includes styrene and ABS, other plastics, but the value of the sorted resins sort of helps make up for that. So as a business, it works. If you were not in a position to sort plastics, then those companies really got jammed up. And what's happening is, there's some centralized plastic sorting facilities that are taking in those mixed bales. And we may do that as well. Now that we've finished our Brooklyn plant and actually have some excess capacity, we can take in those mixed plastic bales, sort them for the resins that have domestic value, and then for the time being landfill the remainder, although obviously we talk into the plastic soil and the other types of technologies that are being explored out there to find homes for those other plastics.
Yeah. Yes, I can, I guess, mirror what he said. Like we don't operate or market MRF materials ourselves. We use waste management to do that, and they have a broad network, I guess, local or in North America to deal with that impact of the fence.
Other questions? Yes, sir. Towards the back.
I'm Kim Davies with Total, and I was curious for Christian. First of all, I saw your video on your new facility, and I thought it was very nicely done as far as your new biofuels facility, or it may be manufactured, but it's very nice. So the question is, are your organics separated by their consumer, or and then the second question is, what makes up the 10% you're not able to recycle?
Good question. Sorry, I probably didn't explain that. We build a big, as I said, the recyclables, the blue bag goes to the MRF, and we build a big waste processing facility to deal with all the rest. And the first step in this process is basically a mechanical and manual separation of the organics in the waste stream. And this is done through, as I said, trommel screen discs and manual sorting. So everything smaller 5 inches feedstock for our composting facility, and it's higher in organic material. There's obviously some contamination. There's no source separated program right now in Edmonton. Is something we're contemplating. But right now we feel comfortable with this central approach. So the organics are separated out and all the rest becomes RDF. The remaining 10% is things which, well, we can recycle and there's no heating value. This is things obviously like stones, glass, particles. There's also residuals from the waste to biofuel. It's a kind of like a char-like material. So it's really things we don't right now have any use for. That makes up the remaining 10%.
So we have time for 1 to 2 more questions. Yes, ma'am?
A comment was made about the challenges around consumer participation in recycling systems, and I was just wondering, in Edmonton, how much do you spend on consumer education, and what are your participation rates? And just, you know, there's been some work documenting what best practices are and the level of investment needed in, you know, educating consumers in recycling programs, and that's typically a really underfunded piece in community programs. So just wondering what you do in Edmonton.
I can't tell you an exact number. I can get it for you later on if you give me your card. But it's something we put a lot of emphasis on. We have one dedicated section in our waste management branch to work on that, and we do this through a series of means. Like we have a lot of education, communication with the public. We have a very cool, what we call master compost or master recycling program, which basically trains volunteers in the community. And these volunteers, to get the training, they tell us we're going to work a certain amount of hours per year for us in like garden shows or other recycling initiatives to get the word out, really. So we have about 900 volunteers now. It's a tremendous program. The participation rates are over 90%. That's what my understanding is, and we do an annual survey, and I can get you any information on that as well. It's not what I'm directly involved with, but it seems to be quite high.
One last question. Who wants to take it? Yes, sir? Right in the corner.
Thanks. Steve Russell with the American Chemistry Council. First, thanks to Elizabeth in New York City. You all really took this leap of faith and led with rigid container recycling, and the scale of what you've done has really helped nationally move the numbers, and so congratulations on that. One of the points that was made a couple times this morning was the difficulty of communicating what's recyclable or not, and part of that stems from different communities doing it different way, and so different communities say, New York will say, well, polystyrene is not recyclable, when in fact actually it is being recycled and it is technically recyclable. The city just its own reasons, chose not to, and that same situation plays out with plastic bags. Do you have any suggestions based on the sort of experience you had over the last year dealing with the advocacy and dealing with the technical capabilities on how to improve our communications so that we don't confuse people and lead them to believe the material is not in fact recyclable when in fact it's not recyclable based on the technology available in that community, and that shouldn't preclude other communities from pursuing it. It's sort of a challenge that we bump up against quite a bit.
Yeah, I think New York City, as most of you know, is larger by population. It's more dense than pretty much any city in the U.S. So when we develop programs in New York City, we have to think about oftentimes how to develop 3 or 4 programs, right? Because we're talking about oftentimes programs that work for both single-family homes all the way up to large high-rise apartment buildings. And they look very different in terms of the physical infrastructure that is needed, the way that the trucks get in and get out and pick up the material. So that old saying, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, is really particularly true in waste management. It's very tricky in New York to figure out, kind of crack a nut, whether it be plastic recycling or composting. In fact, we're looking at that right now with regard to our scaling up of our organic diversion program. So I think the first thing is to kind of bear in mind that when you're looking at a material like styrofoam, there are just practical limitations as far as, pretty much any material can be recycled if it's separated out and if it is collected separately. In New York City, we have to be oftentimes very practical in the way that materials get collected, as well as the capacity to sort, post-consumer sorting. Obviously, the state-of-the-art facility that SIMS has opened introduces a lot of new technology that wasn't available to New York previously, which helps a lot. But still, we have persistent issues with styrofoam that makes it really makes the recycling of that material virtually impossible, considering the system that we have in place for collection. And then I think the other thing that sort of separates New York from other cities is that we have a public sector waste collection system. Many other cities pretty much contract out their waste collection to a private hauler, like Waste Management. New York has not only the largest fleet of city waste collection vehicles in the country, but also a massive workforce of city employees who are doing that, which is great. It's really something that sets New York apart from other cities in a phenomenal way. But what it means too is that we have a different sort of structure in place as far as tweaking our system and making accommodations for certain material types. And also, I think as Tom mentioned, we are still recovering from what was a kind of reversal of policy in the early 2000s made by Bloomberg to suspend the recycling program. So each time you tell New Yorkers, okay, we're not going to take this, or we are going to take this, it really leads to a lot of confusion. In fact, the diversion rates, the recycling rates in the city have still yet to recover from the levels they were at before the recycling program was suspended in the early 2000s. So I think we have to bear all these things in mind when we're making policy decisions and programming decisions about what types of material to accept or to eliminate from the waste stream. And I don't know, Tom, if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
No, I just think that basically in New York, you do have to have a very simple message. It doesn't help the public to say, well, it's not recyclable in New York, but you could recycle it if X, Y, and Z were in place, because that's just makes it even more confusing. I mean, I think in New York, for better or worse, you basically do away with some of the subtleties in order to have a simple message, in order to encourage participation. You're battling, one of the most competitive media markets in the world, a million things, demanding people's attention. You just want to make it super simple. So I think to say it's recyclable
we are out of time, so please join me in thanking our panelists.
Thank you very much, everyone. That was great. Coming from Hong Kong, which has a big waste problem and landfill issue, I hope some of you guys can get there and give some words of advice at some point.